Americans murdered by terrorists in Libya. The deadly September 11th assault going on for hours. Last week, Fox News reporting that requests for help from CIA operatives at the Benghazi consulate compound were denied. Is someone to blame for not sending in reinforcements? Bing West is former Assistant Secretary of Defense in the President Reagan administration, a Marine combat vet, and the author of Into the Fire. He joins us. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Greta.
Well, our information is that they asked for help, at least at some point, or asked to go over and help at the consulate. I'm curious, if a request for help is made, tell me from your own professional background, to whom is the request made? What's the chain of command?
Well, it was quite clear. The president was sitting in the Oval Office when the fight began, and he called in the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. President Obama now tells us that he gave the directive immediately for the military to do everything it needed to do to save our diplomats. The Secretary of Defense then turns to the chairman and says, I want to execute order. Once the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dempsey, hears those words, yes, sir, he's right there, then he calls his theater commander, who's in charge of Africa, General Ham, and he says, get those assets moving, and a written execute order will follow, but get those assets moving. So that's clear. But what really makes it unclear is then the Secretary of Defense came out separately and said, oh no, General Dempsey and General Ham, the two top Army generals, agreed with me that we should do nothing. Well, which is it now? Is it the President of the United States, is the Commander-in-Chief saying, do it, and the Secretary of Defense saying, no, sir? The generals and I agree we're not going to do it? That doesn't make sense to me, Greta. And it's very easy for the President of the United States to come forward and tell the American people, hey, here's my execute order. Because there's no such thing as the military going off and doing something without that execution order. So all I'd like to do, I'd just like to see the execution order.
Would the president, would the president ever have occasion to say, look, this is an emergency situation, things are developing right now, I want you to speak to your general in the theater and have him make a judgment of whether or not that this is a wise, smart, to do anything at this point?
President Reagan used to give those kinds of orders all the time. It's up to you guys. You do what you think is best. That would be fine. Then he would simply say, sir, do I have permission to enter Libyan space, Libyan territorial space? The president says, yes, done. Because General Ham had a force recon detachment of 130 Marines that were assigned to him on Sigonella. He had all kinds of aircraft. They could have been there within 2 hours, and they would have been more than willing to go. So General Ham had the assets. The strange thing is that General Ham told a congressman that he was never given an execute order to enter Libya. And that's different than what the Commander-in-Chief is saying. And the Secretary of Defense is saying something else. And the two generals, I'm really disappointed because they're hurting the military by not coming forward and saying something. When General Petraeus was asked, well, you and the CIA really didn't do anything, he said, wait a second. He said, nobody in the CIA ever gave an order not to go in. So General Petraeus immediately said, it's the National Security Council. General Dempsey, as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, anytime he wanted, could say, yes, I received the execute order, or no, I never received an execute order. Now, that might make him unpopular with the president, but I think that the general owes it to the American public. Otherwise, we think that our military is going along in a way that they shouldn't go along.
All right, just so we can, you didn't mention Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, so I take it the post of Secretary of State would not be in these discussions typically. Is that right? I am absolutely sure that she was in these discussions. But she isn't in the military chain of command. The military chain of command is quite clear. She would have given advice. Her advice would have been, should you go into Libyan territory or not? But the interesting thing is that her embassy had the courage to immediately take a plane, which was as far away as our military base, and they put 6 Americans on that plane and said, go over there 400 miles away and get in that fight and try to help. And they would never have done that if they hadn't gone back to State Department and said, we're going to send in reinforcements.
So you get it even more confused. You get the State Department internally willing to do something, and you have our military not willing to do something. I mean, that's really bizarre.
Where is this breakdown? I'm trying to look. I mean, I've made a little sort of tree of names that you've given me. You know, I'm trying to figure out where do you see is the, you know, where do things break down in this from President Obama to Panetta to General Dempsey to General Ham?
Right at the top, right there. If the president gave the order that he told the American people he did, he was crystal clear. He said, the minute I heard about this, I directed that the military take all steps needed to secure our personnel, to keep them alive. That is an execute order. If the president gave that order, immediately that order is written down by the National Security Council advisor. All of that's on the record. None of that's off the record.
Would you expect him to use the word execute order or his directive? I mean,
no, the president wouldn't have to use that. All he would have to do is say what he told the American public. He said to the American public, I told the military to do everything they needed to do. Once he said that to General...
So he said that, and so it's either under your scheme of things, the way you said, it's either President Obama gave the directive, either unless he didn't give it, but he says he gave it. It's in Secretary of Defense Panetta or General Dempsey is where it locks up then.
Well, Secretary Panetta spoke for the generals, which I found to be a little bit peculiar, and he said General Dempsey, who's the chairman, and General Ham, who's the theater commander, and I unanimously agreed, in essence, to do nothing because we didn't have enough information. Now, wait a minute. Your president has just told you to do something, and the three of you have just said no? Well, if you said no, then you've told the president, no, Mr. President, we're not going to do what you told us to do. Do I believe that's what happened? No. And can we square this, though? Absolutely. This doesn't have to be a debate. All the president has to do is show the execute order. I have the most serious doubts that any such execute order exists.
Bing, thank you. And this continues to be quite, you know, mystery. There are a lot of unanswered questions, and you know, I hope we get the answers.
And I think, Greta, the sooner our military gets out of it, the better.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
And up next.